Good day, all, and welcome back to the Legend Podcast. I am joined today with, oh my goodness, somebody who has completely transformed my leadership and my business acumen, and truly just the complete mindset of how to approach business, people, of course, and just leadership as a whole. I don't know that he really has a title, but I'll give him the titles that I have in mind for myself. Mentor, I think consultant probably falls into their coach, trainer, facilitator, and I think overall just an inspiration on my side. The incomparable Mr. Ralph Kison.
Wow.
Thank you so much
Oh,
for
lovely.
doing
Could you
this.
keep going, please? I mean, this is being recorded, right?
100%.
Well, thank you, Andrew. All joking aside, it's a pleasure, really, when you reached out. I'm just delighted to do this, given the years of connection we have and what you've just referred to. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for coming on. So yeah, you know what? It's been sort of a wild journey, I think, for yourself after a couple of conversations that we've had. For those who are wondering where the legend status portion of it comes from, and we talked a little bit about it prior, is just people who have done legendary things that are bigger than business, tie into business, do things for the community, build people up, because I think that's where legends are generally born and built. And I know most people see it as this iconic, sort of rock star or mythical creature. But I think legends today are essentially everyday people who have done extraordinary things. And, what you've done for me, and I know how you've impacted a lot of people in our field, are extremely grateful. So let's kick off today and start with just the origins. Like, just please share how your career came about, and actually what you do as well for
Yeah,
the
sure.
audience.
Well, Andrew, just to really set it for the viewers, I have two companies. One is my firm where I basically do consulting. So it's Kison Incorporated. And then the one that I'm passionate about both of them, but the one that I'm probably more passionate about looking forward about impacting future generations of leaders and managers and just helping people develop is growth through learning. The Academy, we have a lot of online courses available from communication to leadership to sales and so forth, because that's my background. That's what I do based out of Vancouver. I've been doing this now coming up on 35 years in January, which is kind of even for me to believe, it's kind of like, what? That's when I started it. Prior to that, and we can talk a bit about my background, but in a nutshell, I was going to be a teacher. So when I left high school, I went to college and I was going to be a music teacher. So I just love teaching and I still do. And I'm still a teacher, right? But some call me a coach, some call me advisor, and I'm fine. But fundamentally, I'm a teacher. And what I look to do is help people grow. The name of the company became, pardon me, when it became a company, we went with the name, but it used to be my tagline because I said, well, I want to help people grow through learning. And then I thought, gee, that's kind of what we do. And when we set up the whole e-learning thing, my lawyer, Andrew, did the search and he said, I don't think you're going to get this. Well, we got it for Canada. So we have the trademark. Yeah, he was actually quite surprised. But for me, it's almost predestined because, in a sense, when I started the business 35 years ago, and even prior to that, after I got out of high school, I went to college and then I got distracted. I was an entrepreneur. I had any given time, usually three jobs. So the reality is, I didn't study hard enough to be able to transfer to UBC. Well, that was a blessing in disguise because I might have been a good school teacher, but I don't, probably in hindsight, I'm probably better dealing with adults than in business. But I ended up getting into the workforce. I joined Freightliner Trucks for a bit, worked in a warehouse, wore steel-toed boots, drove a forklift for a short period of time, which was good. I'm glad I did because it's one of those, that job is not beneath me. It's an important job, and people that do that and do it well need our respect. And then from there, I joined a global firm, Union Carbide, and at that time, they had a consumer products division. And so I got into sales with them. Concurrent to that, I was going to night school at BCIT, taking marketing and management and sales courses. And then I left Union Carbide to become a recruiter. So somebody that I knew was a partner of a firm. We had lunch one day, and he says, "Have you ever thought about doing this?" And I, no. I was hoping you'd get me a job. Why are you talking to me? And long story short, I ended up joining that firm and was a recruiter, but then was approached by an executive search firm. So that's the headhunting piece. And top firm in the city, and I ended up going there and I was doing recruiting. And this was in the late 80s, early 90s. We had a bit of a soft recession. And so this was retainer based. It was full fee. It was very different from what I'd done before. And so we tried to give it our best shot. But one day, one of the partners, John, walked in, closed the door, sat down, looked at me, and said, "Ralph, I'm sorry." And I knew what that meant. And that then led to, that was in July. Oh, sorry, it was in June. And so it was like, okay, I'm now on the other side of the desk,
Hmm.
right? I did the outplacement thing and all the rest of that. And I share this with you because it's so fundamental and so important to my story. Because right after that, I found out I had cancer, basically. I discovered that in July, and then August, some surgery, and then radiation, and then joined another firm for a period of time. And it wasn't working out. And I'm in my early 30s, just newly married, and kind of my wife's probably thinking, boy, maybe I should have picked a better one than this one.
Yeah. What did I get myself into?
That other guy's proposition now sounded pretty good, actually. No, and that's not her at all. No, we've been married 38 years now. It's fabulous. But my point is this: often in life, and this is central to what we're going to talk about, be careful what you ask for because you might get it. I felt very strongly, as I still do and did then, about teaching. And I would suggest that what I ended up moving towards was not just a vocation, but my calling, right? And that's, and a lot of people, they go, the what calling? Well, think about it. And we don't use that term much anymore. And it's often assigned to people in religion where someone had a calling to go into ministry or something like that. Well, I think that's limiting it, because you can have a calling to be a brain surgeon, to be a dentist, to be a mechanic. Because some people from a young age, and that was me, always, they know what they want to be. And so I would say calling, passion, purpose, those are all words that align. So back to the origin and purpose, everything I was doing, including night school and what I did, and then I went back to university in my 30s. So it was kind of like, okay, I need to get, develop the skills. So I did a 3-year program at UBC, and that was the turning point. So it, had I done it 10 years earlier, it might have been easier, but I didn't. I did what I did, and it proved to be absolutely on point, because that then led me to starting my business, and the rest is history. Because now I work with companies across North America. I worked with people, particularly young professionals, do a lot of work in the engineering. Didn't start there. Started in sales and automotive, where obviously we met. Still work in that sector, and done work in insurance and other distribution. But I've landed in an area where I'm able to go into companies and help people grow through learning. So there we come back to that, those 3 words, because that's my objective. So as a teacher, a coach, a mentor, an advisor, a strategic or a trusted advisor, confidant, those are all words that actually, depending on the relationship I have with my clients, describe me. So there you go. There's a long introduction to a short question.
No, no, geez, I think that background is so vital and so important because, yeah, generally people will reach that crossroads at some point in time and go, what is really meant for me? And I was watching this clip, I believe, from Robert Greene, and he talked a lot about how you can sort of fake it to a certain point, and then a person who, and you might make a ton of money or build yourself up into an industry, but then the younger, hungrier, cheaper, like the more cost effective person comes along and is willing to do more, uh, and eventually either replace you or battle with you for certain positions, if in the event that you're not all that interested in what you're doing,
Exactly.
and you're doing it for the wrong thing. So that calling and purpose, I think, is so important. So hearing that origin story is, geez, I love it. And I'm happy to hear that. Were there some, like, who were some influences? Like, who were some people in that time where you kind of said, that, kind of lights the way, or that helps me
Yeah.
see sort of the path to that? Because I find it's a path, I think, that's somewhat less traveled. There's not a lot of glamour, I think, behind it, is what I mean. And how did you find your way to that?
Oh man, no, it's a great question, because John had the unfortunate role to come in, and he was one of the senior partners, and it was hard for him. Like, he took no joy in this, and it was interesting because he believed in me. And one of the things that I love to tell about that was, and this is actually very relevant for your listeners, that he did what he had to do because he saw that I was not the right fit. And so there were economic factors and other things, but quite frankly, if I was honest with myself, I realized, that's why I say be careful what you ask for, you might get it. When I got there, I went, I thought this would be different. And so he actually did me a favor by saying, you have to leave. Now, the yogurt hit the fan after that, as I said, with my life and things. But, it is what it is, right? And I don't, I'm not angry. I'm not, oh, why did it happen to me, not someone else? Well, life's not fair, quote unquote. It depends how you measure fairness, because who said everything should be rosy and perfect, good address and a nice car and
Percent.
I mean, no, like, I don't know where that comes from, but that's just a load of bunk. Life is hard. And I think the best leaders, and if you want to keep it in the legacy theme, the people that really become legends or have a legacy, I would say most of them don't start out to be that way, because along the way, my experience has been you have to make really tough decisions that are not popular, but really speak to your core in terms of your values, your beliefs, your principles. And I remember shortly after we started the company, and we, because with any business, I had a larger staff and downtown office and all the rest of that. And I remember there was one firm that approached us that fundamentally we did not morally agree with what they were doing at the time. And this woman who was a senior person in that was actually got to know me through another company, through a utility, a big provincial organization. And she went over here and she said, I love what you do, Ralph. We could really use it. And here's what we're doing. And so I took it to my team. I had issues, but it was, we put it on the table at one of our weekly meetings, and it was unanimous. No, that's not the kind of client we want. And I remember when I went back to her, I said, thank you for for inviting us, but no. And we needed the money. This was not long before I had to lay somebody off. And it was one of those things where the perfect storm. In 1 year, I had three really great national clients, but they were all either taken over, excuse me, or merged, and everything was put on hold, including us. Now, two out of the three we got back, and we did more than ever. But that window, it was a test of my values to see, will I go for the money or will I stay with the principle? And I bring that up, Andrew, because I recall how central it was to us and to me. For me, as the owner of the company, and the person said values and principles are important. Well, here I was a test, and it was, we really needed the cash. And so it came back to, does this stuff mean something? So it's back to calling, purpose, passion, principles. And for some people, they might say, oh, yeah, well, that's, guys like you, that's what you talk about. I'm going to punch a hole in that one, because I believe fundamentally, regardless of the age and where you're at, that is what leads to legend or legacy, using your words. But really, I call it playing the long game. Because if you're just in it for quick hits and wins, quarterly results, you might do well financially. But who are you really? Where's your value proposition? How do you contribute? And more importantly, how do you continue to grow? Because I am more engaged today. I continue to learn, to create new content and IP, all this. And you can tell by my hair color, I've been doing this a while. Plus, I said I've been in business for 35 years. You can kind of fundamentally do the math and get a sense of where I'm at. I contribute more today than I ever did. Not because I think I'm better, just that I know through life and the experience and learning and what I've acquired in terms of a bit of perspective, some wisdom, I'm more valuable. So I'm just no planning of just going away and giving up. I'm not looking for a rocking chair.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think there's something to be said, because I feel like everybody reaches, again, that crossroads to essentially pay versus passion, or pay versus purpose, in a sense.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy, because I mean, I'm in the automotive industry. You see it all the time, where people choose pay and likely reach a point in their career where they can't any longer, and again, either get replaced or get pushed or get,
Yeah.
at least are in an uncomfortable place or position if they're not with the right group or team. So when, like, how did you do you find that the passion, purpose, or calling naturally found you, or how did you find it? Like, because I feel like there's probably a lot of listeners who go, what is my passion, or what is my calling, or what is, and I hear it so often with coaches, the word is ikigai. And It talks about the Japanese, term for what pays you, what the world needs, what you're good at, what you love. And, that's great, but that's still difficult to define for some people. So how did you feel that it was natural? Was it through a process? Did you just sort of work towards something and then realize, oh goodness, like this is my calling?
Yeah, this is a really important question because as I was anticipating some of the things you might ask and reflecting on it, one of the things that I believe is it's a partial answer to your question, Andrew, is self awareness. I always felt, even in high school already, I remember that there were things that I saw and that I thought were important that were different than a lot of people. And when I got into business back then, especially, heavily male dominated and very much hierarchical. And the old we joke about it because I have some clients that have been around a while as well. And now people want performance reviews. They want to talk to their boss. They want engagement. And back then we joke like if your boss didn't call you, that was good. Like if you didn't hear from him this year, that meant this was a good year. Yeah, he or she had other things they had to focus on. So basically, for me, it was right back to the beginning, a disturbance, if you will. It was this: I want to have impact, and what did it for me in my teen when I was in my teens, in grade 11 or 12 already, because my background's in music, and I was going to be a music teacher, so I didn't add that part. I said teacher, but I want to be a music teacher. So I started teaching piano in my basement. So I had kids from the neighborhood, and then they'd tell their friends, and then the parents. Before you know it, I was teaching piano 3 nights a week, and I hired another gal from down the street to because I had two pianos in the basement, and or my parents did. I lived at home. I wasn't on my own, but so we had this little business of teaching children piano. But the point is, it was piano. Could have been tutoring math. It could have been whatever. It was teaching, and I loved it, and the kids loved me. And I thought, okay, I'm a teacher. And then, as I said, that was that calling. But then I realized maybe not music, but business. And then back to the discovering in my 20s that I was an entrepreneur. I didn't know the word at the time, but when I look back, I go, yeah, of course, that's what you were, Ralph. You're an entrepreneur. And so the teaching led to opening doors. And so when I went to school and night school and all the rest of that, I was drawn towards the teaching, but in the business path. But I always had a sense. And so for me, the key word for me was, and it is for yourself, and because I know you quite well, and I know we've talked about this in the past, and for others, is self awareness. Do you know yourself, and not just I have a sense of who I am, but getting away from the social media and all the noise of the city, like literally maybe going for a walk in the forest or down to the beach. Now, I know people that live in Calgary, there's maybe not a beach, or people in parts of Canada or the US, there ain't no beach, but there are spaces where there's no noise. And this is important. It's that time to be alone with yourself. And we've become a culture now where people avoid being alone with themselves because they don't know themselves. And I would say they don't even know how to engage with self. So I think this is central to the conversation, Andrew. I hope you don't mind I'm taking it here.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Because through self-awareness, and then as you know, there's the various tools I use. There's personality, but psychometric, it's quite an advanced tool. The Clifton Strengths Finder, so Gallup, and there's a lot of other tools out there. And maybe working with a counselor, doing some assessment to really start getting a sense of who you are and testing that. So in my teens, I already had a sense for teaching. Then I taught at night school, as I mentioned. Then I started my business. And now I coach, mentor, and teach young people in particular because I am really concerned that my generation, for the most part, has done a really lousy job. So any of you guys out there that kind of like me, if you're watching, it's probably because you haven't given up and you're not checking out. But I believe we and you, Andrew, and everybody else that comes up has a responsibility for mentoring, coaching, and teaching. It isn't take the money and run. It's if take the money if you've earned it, honestly, and then keep showing up because you have to pay it forward. It's a bit of there was a movie by that name many years ago, but it's paying it forward and it's also the long game about, as I like to say, leave it better than you found it.
I love it. I love it. And that's very true. And when I think about coaching, consulting, training, management, and leadership, I think that's what people forget. When I talk about young, or when I talk to young staff who go, "Oh, I'm going to be a manager one day," and I give them the holistic conversation of, do you
Yeah.
understand the responsibility that
Yes.
comes with that, the challenges, and how do you know, is your method so tried and tested that when you train somebody something, you know it's going to work and where it's going to lead them 10 to 20 years down the road. I was that naive young guy who said, oh geez, I could train people and I could do this, and clearly I could, but it was also because of the amount of time and effort and the people who had sort of put into myself. So yeah, absolutely, I think everyone has that responsibility.
One quick comment to that, and some people may be familiar with the four levels of learning. It may be called something else, but I've used this for years. You've probably seen it. I probably shared it with you. Where I'm going, it applies to me. When I was with Union Carbide in my mid 20s, they let a manager go, and so the vice president and national sales manager came out, and I'll say this with some embarrassment actually. I thought, because I was doing well in sales and I had some success, that they were coming out to offer me the job. And then I remember when I went to the hotel where they were having meetings, and it was a very different conversation. I went, yikes. And I look back and I go, well, I could do this. My goodness, I didn't know that I couldn't do it. And there's a lot of young people that are really bright, so highly educated, and obviously confidence and belief in yourself is important, but so is self-awareness. And the four levels I referred to are: level one is unconscious incompetence. You don't know, you don't know. You're ignorant. Level two is conscious and conscious incompetence. You know you don't know. So I'm consciously incompetent. I can't actually do this. Conscious competence, it's I call it, you have an instruction manual and you keep reading it to make sure you're doing it right until you can throw it away because it's muscle memory. It's like, okay, I know this. And that's unconscious competence. Now, that takes time to get there. And if it comes down to managing people, and this, I want to throw this in because the questions you sent me got me thinking. And I see, like on LinkedIn, particularly, these infographics with, and they drive me crazy. I've unfollowed people when I start going down this path. 12 steps to acting like a CEO.
Right.
And so it's a family show. So I'm not going to say what I'd like to say, but you get my drift. I think, are you kidding me? All I have to do is walk and talk like a duck, and I'm a duck basically.
Right.
The equivalent, you know where I'm going. No way. I'm angry at the people who want to build their following by putting out some stupid infographic that says all you got to do is this and you'll be successful. No. Now, is there value in that? Yes. So some people might go, wait a minute, I have one of those on my desktop or something. If it's a reminder, if it's a refresher, if it's a guide where you look at it and you go, oh, I never knew about that. And there's some that I've seen with a lot of the tools and resources I use. I go, yeah, that's a good reminder. But if you think it to management and leadership, leading an organization or a team is as simple as 12 steps or 10 steps and seven secrets and all the rest of that, man, you don't get it.
Right. Well, and there's no depth then behind it. And I think we know when it comes to leadership management, you are a CEO role, you are dealing with a lot of people, and that requires a lot of depth. And, you know, I've had now an opportunity to see, a few styles of leadership, and I didn't realize how, there was a time we used to say managing someone's emotions or managing somebody's feelings. You have to be careful of not doing it too much, but there is an understanding that if you don't know how to manage somebody's feelings or their emotional intelligence or your own as well, then you can cause yourself some real problems. What would you say, is sort of, or was, I guess, as you were sort of developing through? Because when I think about, there's always fears of, I think, the younger generation starting businesses, especially as you mentioned, freshly married, different challenges. Maybe they have children, maybe they have different responsibilities. What were the challenges, I guess, that you faced through that process? And, maybe your top one or two where you go, oh, geez, like I really wish I knew, that this was going to be it. And I get that there are times where there's not going to be a step-by-step process to tell us, hey, here are the two things that everybody faces. But what would you say were the two that you faced the most,
Sure.
or,
No, it's a
or
great
the
question.
most memorable?
What I would say right out of the gate is saying no more often. I'm one of these people that, and this isn't bragging. It's just I know this of myself. Back to self awareness. I'm very good, very creative. I can influence and lead and engage and teach and motivate and inspire. Not because I come in and say, I'm going to motivate you. It's just that's who I am. That has also attracted people to me to say, oh, we'd like you to be part of this organization, like you to be part of this. And I thought, yeah, it's a good cause, a noble cause. Why don't I go do this? And then I found in hindsight, and I still wrestle with this a little bit, but I'm much more selective now, is learning to say no. And if I had said no to some things earlier in my career, which at the time, again, being honest with myself, were probably more ego driven and say, oh, they want me. Can I help them? Yes, I can. But it was a distraction. It would have been taking me, if I could have stayed on my path a bit more. And then the next thing part of this, because I was thinking about this in advance of our interview here, I've worked with three coaches over the years. One shortly after I started my business. So, Alan now passed away years ago, but I worked with him for a number of years, and he was at least 15, maybe 20 years older than me. Then I worked with another coach, executive coach, and he's an author. He's based out of the States and really kind of an get in your face guy, but he was helpful. And then I worked with the third one, Walt Sutton, who retired a number of years ago. And these three men really challenged me because as a strong personality and somebody who achieves, I needed somebody that wasn't afraid to, quote, get in my face. And I remember Walt, particularly in one of our coaching sessions, well, actually, Alan, going back because when I started my business, I came out of recruiting. I was teaching. I was doing a number of things. So basically, the analogy he used, he said, Ralph, there's five horses. He used the analogy of each of my talents and skills. And he said, you have five horses you can ride. And he says, you can't ride five horses because he said your business can go down this path, this path. He says not all of them. And I go, but I love my horses. So
Right.
kept trying to ride them all for a while until I read, I got to give this horse away. I got to sell it.
Right.
And then one day it was with Walt, and this is probably 20 years later. And I'll never forget this because we're in a meeting and Walt looks at me and there were three things I was working on. And coaches don't normally tell you what to do, but Walt in his wisdom and for quite frankly, my respect of the man, he said, Ralph, I'm going to tell you what you got to do. And I needed him to say, stop it, because I could convince myself it was noble and honorable, and it was, but it wasn't really helping. And now, Andrew, where I'm really at, even more so with my life, and my little S curve, right? One S intersects with the other, the drop, keep, add. I continue to look at myself every year and say, what do I need to drop? What do I keep? My core competencies and skills. Where do I grow? And I've shared this model with you. I've shared it with a lot of people over the years. And I found that this came from teaching a bunch of young professionals when I did a emerging leaders program with Stantec, their large consulting firm. And I created this little framework. There's lots of S curves, but mine was a bit different. And it is resonated because people go, you're right. I have all this stuff, but letting things go
Mm-hmm.
intentionally. And letting go doesn't just, when I say drop, that might mean delegate to a junior. And delegate then invokes teaching, coaching, mentoring, sponsoring. So you're not just abandoning, you probably are now moving into that role of coach, building your legacy and equipping others to ascend as you continue to ascend. And that's what this is all about. It's just every rung you move up to, every level you advance to, you got to make sure that those behind you are being equipped by you or others to be competent. Otherwise, you haven't done your job. You may have managed the job, the role, but this is where we get the fork in the road. Some people manage, but they don't lead. But the best ones manage and lead.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. What's a com? You know what? And I ask you this because I feel like you've seen a lot, and I just mean this from certain very very talented people. I love knowing that, like you said, a challenge of just simply saying no sometimes is really difficult because I love the analogy of five horses, by the way, because yeah, once you get to a certain level, of course you have all these different skill sets, you have all these different passions and things you enjoy, but there is at one point in time a decision that has to be made that says, again, this is the ikigai. This is what I'm good at. This is what I love. This is what the world needs. This is what will pay me. And this is again sort of the calling. What are some misconceptions that you've found, or that you've sort of seen, or some mistakes that people make when sort of climbing that corporate ladder? Because I'm sure you've seen people sort of rapidly or even just climb up the ladder and realize, maybe once they get there it's not for them, or might be a different role. Like, what are some common, I guess, signs that somebody might not be on the right path to continue up that ladder, or when to know, okay, this is it? I can't remember what the term is, but that some people or most people are promoted one level above where they should be just because of time and by default and whatever, and likely are in the wrong position because of that reason, unless.
Yeah. That's the Peter principle. It's actually a Canadian professor. He came up with that
Oh,
term, getting promoted basically till you get up to till you're incompetent, and then you become a bottleneck. It's a bit of an oversimplification, but you see that in companies. You see that particularly in government in a lot of organizations where it's seniority based and positions are protected, and that's why we have so many people that ascend to a level and then end up becoming a blockage. And where it becomes really bad is when you have people on the way up who are blocked and cannot advance. And it's not just government. So I'm not picking on government. I'm just, those are the easy ones because we see it most evident. You see this in companies. You see this in any organization, even not for profits and volunteer, right? I've been on, I'm on a number of boards and been on boards, and some of them I've just got like, forget it. You know, we got this nice person that needs to go away, right? Or we get out of that role and maybe help maintain the building, cut the lawn every second week or something.
right.
And that's not that's important physical plant maintenance, right? So I'm not, there's not a put down, go cut the lawn because you can't do anything else. But maybe you need to realize you need to move to something else and make space. But I think what's really important here is for people to answer your question, what's driving this? Ego. I think for the most people, and they would not say that, oh, but I have aspirations to advance and I do this and I do that. And then my question would be, who are your role models? Who are your influencers? Give me some names. Let me check them out. Because my mom used to tell me, she said, tell me who you're hanging out with and I'll tell you who you are. And today's version is tell me who you're following and what you're watching, and I'll get a pretty good sense of who you are and what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah, I love that. And it's pretty easy. And again, I fell into a very similar, and I tell people often the reason why I started is very different than the reason why I keep going. And is it based on there's a different viewpoint now that you've traveled to a certain place and you see different things, or possibly, yeah, that it feels right now, or there's different things I can do and help affect. Let's talk about leadership. I have a piece in here, as you know, about hot takes.
Yeah,
And I say this because I've recently, as you know, and I won't get into it too much, but I've seen and I've had the opportunity to see leadership in sort of two different ways. And you know what? I've had great mentors and leaderships. You fall within that, and then I have another group that are very business focused, or you know, where does vulnerability play into leadership? And I thought this was a really good and important question, I think, to ask you because, again, I've seen it. You've talked a lot about it, I think, in certain conversations. Is it a strength in business and leadership? Is it a weakness? Like, do people, I hear this often, like, don't show them that you're vulnerable, or they'll take advantage of you, or they'll. What is your hot take on
yeah,
vulnerability in
yeah.
business and
And I
leadership?
laughed when you sent me the sheet hot takes. I went, oh gosh, what's a hot take? Try to give you a hot take. No, but it's a great question because we're looking for hacks and hot takes and all these things now, which goes back to my infographic sheet. Because what I made some notes thinking about our conversation today, and I love the point. So what I actually put down is humility, honesty, admitting mistakes. There's vulnerability. It's another way of saying it. So
100%.
absolutely, Andrew, I agree with you because the most effective leaders and the ones that have been transformative and go back in society, whether it is business, government, the arts, religion, whatever, the best ones, not necessarily the ones that kind of built a regime around themselves and glorified their ego and their narcissism, but actually made a difference in that impact in any discipline. They were usually the humble leaders, the vulnerable ones. And a great example, and I thought of this before, but I'll throw this in here as a resource for your viewers. If people have never heard of Jim Collins in the book Good to Great, I strongly recommend you look him up. Jim Collins, Good to Great. Go to his website and you'll find a summary there of the book Good to Great. This is now about 25, maybe 30 years old, but
That's
it
great.
is a classic. And back to your point, because it does relate, if you want to figure out what you should be when you grow up, as Jim does, and it's all based on research of companies, some that were great companies and they're not around anymore, get beyond the companies and look at what they in their research found the best companies did. Well, he talks about, I'll give you two quick hacks here. One is he talks about level 5 leaders. They are servant leaders, they're humble leaders, they're vulnerable, to your point. And the other part in the book that is just so imperative, and I've come back to over the years, is he calls it the hedgehog. What's your hedgehog principle? Because he says, as a company, what leaders need to do when you look at your firm, you have to identify what can you be the best in the world at. Wow, well, that's best in the world. Okay, well, if not in the world, maybe in BC, maybe in Washington State, maybe in Montana, maybe in Ontario, wherever, it doesn't matter. You pick your location or the city even. But when you start looking at that, rather than trying to boil the ocean and be all things to all people, boil a pot of water and make a cup of tea and make a good cup of tea, metaphorically, that people go, I like that. And you go, I know how to make it and I make it well. So I think a couple of things. One is, yes, vulnerability, transparency, humility, and back to self awareness. And the other hack I'll throw in here, because we've talked about this over the years in our sessions about Daniel Goleman. There's other people talk about emotional intelligence. But there's another guy that if you haven't heard of him, look him up, go to his website. And Goleman's whole concept around self awareness, he has 12 competencies. It's basically a matrix: self awareness, other awareness, social, relational. And there's a starting point. If you want to become better at a leader, become self aware, understand the issue of emotional intelligence. And this isn't just being nice and more empathetic and putting your hand on people's shoulder when you talk to them to make them feel like you're really connecting. That may be part of it, depending on the person and the situation. But it starts with yourself. Are you emotionally self aware? Do you know what your calling is? Going back to that, do you understand what your passions are? Have you educated yourself? Because there's a lot of people that are passionate about stuff, but really they don't have the chops to do it because they haven't gone to school, right? And that's the problem with the Peter Principle. Passion can take you to a point and then you become a roadblock. That's why I went back to university in the 30s. To be really candid with you, Andrew, I was going down a path and I realized to have credibility and impact and to be competent, I needed to go back to school. It was tough. I won't tell you everything that was going on in my life at the time. I mean, that was probably not the best time to go back to school,
Yeah.
putting it mildly, but I did because I realized I had to suck it up and, as we say, put on my big boy pants and do what I had to. And that was in my late 30s. And so, and I say my age again because I'm not embarrassed about that at all, because I realized I had to get this together. And I graduated from that program just before I turned 40. And that was one of my goals. I wanted to have this in the bag before the big 4-0 hit. And then it was a game changer.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I have a piece that, that keeps coming to mind of, profit over people. And it's pretty clear. I know what your answer will be, but what would you say to, a new emerging manager or a supervisor or somebody who kind of steps into their role and essentially, I wouldn't say is required, but wants to sort of make a bit of noise? There's a level of, I would suggest maybe job security or insecurity. There's probably a piece of just ego to prove themselves. Like, what would you say to them when we know that choosing people over profit is the long term sustainable way to win? Of course, like, what type of advice would you give somebody in that type of a role who is sort of kind of stuck at that crossroads to go, geez, do I just go get my hands really dirty and just dive in and go make a bunch of money for the company, or make a bunch of moves to kind of create some noise for myself, or take that other step of focusing on people, even though it may be a longer term, as the word you used that's great is transformative approach? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Andrew. And this, from my own experience over time, was where I was probably too much focused on people when I had a larger firm and more consultants, and that I, admittedly, in hindsight, would say I probably was a bit too benevolent on the people side, and I should have been harder on the profit side, and not to push them, but to teach them how to get the profit. See, it's real simple in my mind. I'm always going to end up back on teaching and equipping the people, because if you equip them with the soft skills to be a great leader that everybody likes working for, and you have wonderful outings and social things and everybody loves the boss, great. But if you're not hitting quota, if you're not equipping them to bring the profit in, because unless you're working for the United Way or the Red Cross or whatever, and even they have goals and metrics, right? So
100%.
you can't lose money there too. So I think it's the balance between the people and the profit. And then I would say there are seasons where I think COVID going back was a season where a lot of organizations and leaders blew it because they focused too much on the people
Hmm.
and they lost the profit and then they maybe lost the company and all kinds of stuff happened. And there were some that said, look, people, we still need to stay in business. We're likely not going to remain profitable, but we want to remain viable. So that means, and this is where culture comes in, and you didn't just create this during COVID. COVID, I always say, was the great litmus test because that's when you put the stuff in the liquid, you saw what color it was. Was it culture or was it just profit or was it a little of both?
Right.
So leaders had to build this leading up to it so that they could withstand the hit of COVID, that people trusted the leader to say, I see that she's not just in it for profit. I see that he cares about us. However, it is a company. We have expenses. We have da 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 da. They do the list. And then people where there was culture and a sense that there was responsibility around profitability and managing the business, that's where people actually said, I'm prepared to give up some salary, excuse me, or I'm prepared to do this. Or there was a drop and everybody said, yeah, we're all in for it for each other. And they came out of it. And I can't give you a good example, but I know there's lots of stories of companies where they did it right. And they're here today and probably better than they were before. And there's some that they're gone. And I remember at the time, this ties into this where it was all profit, where some companies, I was seeing this through some of the feeds that I follow, cut staff, do this. And it was all the profit. The business needs to remain healthy. Okay, fine, do that. But now you've really shown your true colors to your employees. We now know what your real DNA is.
Percent. Yeah, and you know what? I've seen both sides firsthand. I have a great example. I mean, Taylor Automotive. When I was there throughout COVID, they, everybody took a pay cut, to fund to ensure that things continued on. Obviously, everybody was reimbursed and was back to and made whole, which was great. But and then I've seen the flip side of things where a bunch of people get let go, and the people that that company really wanted to keep and really thought fit their culture went, well, no, that's not what I want to be a part of, and departed. So it's interesting to see both of those. It ties perfectly into my next thought. What is your take on, and this has been such a hot topic, especially after COVID and some of those things. But what's your take on work life balance in business? Like, do you feel that people can accomplish big things while having work life balance? And I say it in quotations because that is different for everybody. Work life balance might be an 8-hour work week for some people. Some people might feel, work life balance is having freedoms to go and get their hair cut or be at their child's recital. Um, Lots of talks about, the 4-day work week emerging. What is your take around it? And how do you feel, that would affect somebody's development and growth? Like, can you still be ambitious and want to, create big things or beautiful things, or, sort of find your way up the corporate ladder while having that work life
Yeah,
balance?
yeah. And I thought about this. It's a great question because my my short answer is going to be no. And then some people, well, what do you mean no? Well, hear me out. I believe that there are seasons, and that's the analogy I wanted to share. So thanks for this question because I thought about this in advance. So I'll give you an analogy of a farmer. So if a farmer wants work-life balance, probably not going to do well. And you
Yeah.
already know where I'm going with this one.
Yeah.
Because here in Canada, at least in some other countries, they live. If you're in the tropics, there ain't no seasons. It's hot and humid all the time. So you have to act accordingly. But in a lot of parts of the world, you are driven or the seasons determine what you have to do if you want to be successful. In other words, if you want to grow corn or you want to do whatever the crop is, you can't say, well, can we move the temperature and the seasons around? Because I actually want to take the family to Hawaii for 2 months, in the middle of planting season. Go, but, the window just closed. So to answer your point, I believe work-life balance. Well, first of all, here's a thought, Andrew. What happens when in life when you think about this? And I thought about this years ago. Really, this got me thinking, and I really reflected. I said, okay, so when I hit balance, like when you think of something like you balance the tires on a car, you balance something. What do you typically want to do when you achieve balance? Well, you want to maintain it. And it's the kind of nobody moves, nobody gets hurt scenario. Well, you tell me how you're going to advance your career by nobody moves, nobody gets hurt. There are seasons, back to the farm now, where you just got to get in the field and plow. And where we live here, when I drive home, I'm in Surrey, the Delta area in the lower mainland. There's a lot of areas with fields. And I see these farmers in the spring out there planting the potatoes and whatever the crop is with their tractor at night because the fields are dry enough and they got to get the stuff in the ground. So they didn't go home at 5:30 and they're watching TV tonight. They're in their tractor till 10 or 11 o'clock planting. And they're probably up the next morning at 5 o'clock out there again planting the rest of the field because at some point they go, okay, that's all I can do today. But then the potatoes grow and then they do whatever they do to the crop during the growing season. Then comes harvest season. They're out there probably again with the lights on till 10 or 11 o'clock or later. Then the winter hits, and then they're probably in Hawaii for a couple of weeks. Then they're doing whatever. That to me is realistic balance. That's how the world goes. The world is not here to serve me, as most people think. I am here to find my way through it and to contribute and to be mindful of the natural rhythms and seasons of life. Take farming as an example. Bring that into the company. There's times where a startup, an IPO, or whatever, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You work, and you bust your hump to get over the hump. And I've got over 35 years. I can give you examples where my wife, she works in the business with me. It was a period of time, I mentioned earlier, we had to let one person go, but we tried hard not to let people go. I didn't take a salary for probably 6 months. Karen took enough of a salary so we could pay the mortgage and bills and buy food. Literally, I don't need an award. I don't want anybody to say, oh, you're so honorable. It's what I had to do. Was my life balanced? No way. There was no balance. I was getting up at 5 in the morning to go to work, and then I was doing this, that, and the next thing.
I love it.
But I did it because I had to. That's how I got to 35 years of business. And the other thing, my friend, this is where I learned. That's where we often talk about you get the scars. Well, I still have some scars, not literally, but metaphorically, of those seasons. They hurt, but I didn't run away. I stayed at it. So am I for a life work balance? Yes, I am. So the less people think this guy, what's with him? I am. I now work 4 days a week. I've been doing that for a couple of years. But I also have made some changes. I use my assistant. I delegate. I say no. We use AI. There's all kinds of tools now that I'm using to still be productive, to contribute and be effective and to have more balance. But I mean, look at me. I'm not 35 anymore. I'm not trying to build it. I want to remain relevant. So of course I'm going to look at the balance. But there's seasons, my friends, where you got to be on the tractor and then you got to drive with the lights on at 12 o'clock at night.
I love it. I love
Other
it.
than that, I don't have an opinion.
You know what's interesting is I feel like that's transformed a lot, over a certain period of time. And actually, I feel like it was somewhat of disrupting certain industries to sort of put that message out there to be like, yeah, 4-day work weeks, and not to say that that doesn't work, because I'm sure it can, especially if your 4 days that you're working is 12 hours or whatever it may be. But certain corporations that are looking at their competitors, and now all of their staff wants work-life balance, while the other staff or the other team is driven by purpose and are there as long as they need to be to get the job done, like you said, for harvests and for
Yeah.
different seasons, right? So I love that, and you're
Well,
right.
Andrew, let me just take one point further. What I'm about to say, I'll preface it. I'm not trying to offend anyone or kind of put the stick in their spokes, but we need to think about what I'm about to say to some degree, and I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say. When you look at things globally, there are other countries and cultures that are driven and committed to succeeding and to winning. And we want to have the proverbial cake and eat it too. That's fine. But what happens one day when you don't get cake, when they give you a dry cracker? Because it's like, well, based on your effort and contribution, this is actually what you've earned. Well, that's not right. I want. That's great. What have you contributed? And we have to wake up to realize, in order to be competitive, to deserve what we are asking for, we need to deliver value. And sometimes that means showing up even when you don't feel like it. Honestly, it's funny we're on this. Just the other day, I thought back to probably 5 years into the business, 10 years into the business. We're becoming successful. We have national contracts. I have people literally across the country. Programs got translated in French. I got a guy in Quebec doing for a national client all the French training. And it was just growing, growing. And there were times I got up in the morning after I had 5 hours sleep or whatever, and the kids and the this and the that. And I was just bagged. I had to get up and I had to show up. Now, fortunately, I had the skill, the talent, I worked at it that I could. And I think for the most part, I was effective. But I got to, some days I wasn't on my A game. They probably got my B game. And I think some of my clients were gracious and they were kind and they said, okay, maybe not the best day, but his heart's in the right place. He's trying hard and he's done well before. So everybody has an off day. And so, but I did it. It's back to my earlier comment, put on your big boy pants or big girl pants and show up. And I don't think we're saying that enough, but you go to other countries around the world and they're showing up in spades. And then we go, well, that's not fair. Really? I don't know. Who describes fair? If you want it your way, yeah, then it's not fair. But it's the old golden rule. The person with the gold makes the rules. You ain't got the gold. If you got silver or bronze, then you have bronze rules or silver rules. But the
100%.
golden rule, there's a different standard.
Yeah, it brings me to I don't know his last name, but his name is Vusi. He's an African or a leadership coach. I think he is his tag or but what he says is you can have work-life balance, but that would essentially put you on a different schedule of development, growth, and advancement in your life and career. And that really resonated with me because you have tons of people who want and a 6 or 8 hour work day, and you want people to be off at certain times, and when they go home they don't want to be on their phones and things, and it's understandable, but they have to come to the realization that you will then get essentially what you deserve, or you will get what you've earned. I do feel that I feel like a lot of that is starting to, I wouldn't say go away, but I think everyone's starting to realize that that's becoming the reality, because there's no businesses that can sustain and compete at a grand scale or a global scale when you have, yeah, most of your staff that are not willing to put in and be a part of the calling or the vision. Because we all know when a company has a collective vision and they're all working towards it, oh my goodness, there's no stopping them, right? And because some people will work day and night and some people will look past some of their own personal things, and that's why age and so like circumstances in life are different and change that. You talk about automation. I only have a couple more questions because I know we're running out of time here. But I this just tells me we need a part two. I
Okay.
feel like I gotta
I'm
have you on again. You talked about AI, and like what are some of your general predictions of AI? This was something I really wanted to get into this episode because it's such a hot topic. You're hearing so much about it. I think there are a lot of people that are clueless to what AI is doing or what they're capable of, but there's a whole other group of people that are going, I know what it does. I know what it can do. How do I tie that into my business? How does it change my business? So, first, I would ask you, what are your general thoughts? How does it affect your world of coaching and leadership training? And yeah, what are some things do you think that people can utilize it for?
Okay. Great question. And I'm going to answer that by giving you a bit of perspective. AI, first, I use it. I'll talk in a few minutes about how I use it. I see it as a real great tool. I've been using it fairly actively for the last year for my newsletters. I create my content. I don't ask it to write. I start off, so my voice is there. I find it's a great tool to edit punctuation, and it's often it comes back, gee, I wish I would have written it like that.
100%.
It's helping me improve the quality of my content. And that's important because I don't want people to go, yeah, his writing is okay, but AI helps my writing go from sometimes pretty good to sometimes really good. Why wouldn't I take that? I mean, it's just like, duh. So I use it there. And then through, we are now teaching AI. We've got the license. So we are teaching it because I mentioned my academy. We have the opportunity to expand to a realm of a lot of programs based on my teaching, whether it's in leadership or management or communication or whatever. Well, over the years, I've created tons of content. We can now start using that to teach AI to create in my voice and direct it. It's like another assistant. It's a machine assistant. And it's a machine, folks. It is not a person. They give you a nice voice and it talks to you nicely. It's not a person. It's a tool. It's a resource that if you use it wisely, it will serve you rather than you serving it. But here's the real point, Andrew. I want to go back. So again, just given when I started my business in 1991, as I mentioned, we came into our soft recession. So I started probably at the wrong time, but I didn't read the headlines. I got terminated the year before and all this stuff that happened. I told you my story and I went, well, if I'm going to try it, why not try it now? And if it doesn't work, I can always go get a job again because I already had offers. It's interesting. Here's the thing I didn't mention earlier. But when I was let go, I had clients that I was doing recruiting for, I had worked for them, and they heard I was available. They said, why don't you come join us, be a sales manager or be a this or be a that? And I said, thank you. That was nice, but I want to give this a whirl. And so I ended up, and obviously I've succeeded. But as I was starting off, I had to deal with trends. And any of your viewers here are a little older, they'll remember we went through the downs that we had all these euphemisms, downsizing, and then we had right sizing. Then we had this whole Y2K. The world was going to end and planes were going to fall out of the sky on, you know, January 1st of 2000, right? So we had maybe we had a New Year's party. We had friends over and we're all kind of count down and we're waiting for the lights to go out.
Crazy. Yeah.
Oh
I
no,
remember
okay.
that.
And the music's still playing. Okay, and we watch the news. Did any planes fall out of the sky now? No. So
Crazy.
my point is, and listen to what I'm saying because the media drove this. People made money because the world was going to end. So we had Y2K, we had empowerment of employees, management by walking around, TQM, total quality management. I probably still have the book on my shelf. Some guys became millionaires because they wrote a book that everybody went, we're going to do that. So, what am I saying here? I'm saying this too shall pass. It will be incorporated, it will be a tool, and we will become better because of it. Just like all that other stuff that came along, like the .com was driven by greed and the desire to be at the front of the line. Some people were successful. A lot of people lost a lot of money. People are going to be successful. People are going to lose money. And it's not the genie. There's no genie in the bottle, right? It's empty. Shake the bottle. There's nothing in there. You have to create your reality, and AI is a tool. So as I said before, I think it's a great tool, but people need to understand it. And the other thing, real quick, I'm part of a mastermind group. There's a guy in Toronto, a guy in Ireland. We meet monthly. We have for years now. We're all consultants and advisors, right? We all do the same kind of work. But in the last year, our discussions around AI, from one guy going, that it's not going to take off, and we're going, oh yeah, watch this, to the point now, how do we use it? How do we tap into it? How do we leverage all our decades of experience and insight to use it as a processor? AI is a processor that we're going to use to take our content, refine it, be strategic, and raise our value rather than throw up our hands and say, oh, well, I guess AI is going to tell us what to do. No flipping way. No flipping way. It's a tool. It's going to work for me. I'm not going to work for it.
I love
So
it.
I don't know if that squares with you, but there's again my unvarnished opinion.
No, I love it. I love it. And it's good to know how it's incorporated into your business because you're right. There are, yeah, there's this idea that everyone thinks, oh no, it's going to start to take over the world. And yeah, sure, there's that possibility, as anybody who's watched Terminator in their life. But I do believe, I agree with what you're saying, is it will just it will be implemented into day to day or different things. And in many ways, it will be a wave, just like, your cryptocurrencies and things. It becomes a part of what we're doing. But if you're not on sort of ground floor or ground level with it, it's really difficult to be able to capitalize on some of it, right?
Yeah, and Andrew, I like what you just said, and I would crypto and whatever. I'd say it becomes a menu item,
Yeah,
right? When
exactly.
you look at what's on the menu, there's just more on the menu now.
That's right.
And if you just only want to have that, I guess go fill your boots. But what you're going to run into, and that's what I'm trying to say here. Hopefully, people hear me that I'm not being negative about it. And I actually believe we need guardrails because it's really powerful. I know like this much, but I know enough to know that if things like this, just like power and control, are not in check, and there's not guardrails, and there are people that have a conscience and put, make sure that it remains ethical. I'll use that term broadly speaking. Then can it take off? Yeah, of course it can. But that's where we have to speak up. But if you're scared of it or you give into it, it won. You have to be part of to understand what it is you're dealing with so that you can be a meaningful contributor rather than someone standing afraid of the thing.
Yeah. Geez. Yeah. Thank you so much. I have you for one more minute, maybe. Yeah. First off, again, I really got to have you back because there's so many other things I'd love to ask you and talk about. Yeah, what is a sort of a final message to young entrepreneurs, the next generation? You've given, in my opinion, just to me that today is a whole almost like a master class of certain pieces to look out for and certain things. Like, what would be a message or a piece of advice that you would give up and coming entrepreneurs, managers, people who leaders of the next generation?
Yeah, great question. And I thought about that. So I'm going to look down because I want to make sure because I thought about this and I wrote it out. I won't read to you what I've written, but I'll give you the essence. I think one of the things people should be the key around this, I put first self awareness. Too many people do not know who they are. They're trend chasers and identity seekers and, want to be an influencer. And so even if you become an influencer, you influence till the next one comes along and influences more than you do, and then you're gone. It's like a one hit wonder, right? The people that are doing, a lot of the bands that tour casinos now, right? I mean, and a lot of them are really good, so it's not a knock,
Tribute, yeah, yeah, for sure.
right? And you can still make a living, but I guess if you all you want to do is play casinos, okay, whatever. But I want to remain relevant. So self awareness, don't chase the trends, and then what I wrote down was become brilliant on the basics, the basics and fundamentals of knowing your craft. Master your craft, become skilled because no one can ever take that away from you. Because if AI kind of throws out something that sounds more interesting, and here's my point, Andrew, and why this is so important. What I'm looking forward to, and this is sort of not in some sort of sneaky way, but it's going to happen where somebody, and it's already people being busted for letting AI do their thinking. I do work with in the last couple of years. We started doing work with doctors, right? So I'm doing work with doctors, engineers, like really smart people, leaders in the automotive industry where we met in other areas. And what I am absolutely convinced of is if you are going to be put on the stand in a trial as an expert witness, and if you are, they see you as one based on what you kind of patched together and what's the word I'm looking plagiarized to get there, you're going to be embarrassed very quickly because when the heat is turned on in the moment of truth, you either know it or you don't. And so that's why brilliant on the basics. And the analogy I gave is like you can tear down a house, like some stuff needs to be torn down because it's old and rotting and decrepit. But there are buildings, and again, think of this as an analogy that they don't knock down because they have good bones, foundation. So what do? You renovate, you upgrade the plumbing, you upgrade the wiring, you upgrade the technology, but the building, and that's the analogy for people. And I see myself that my bones, in terms of what I've learned over the decades, people have taught me, what I learned at school and mentored me, they're still solid. So am I updating? Of course I am. Hence AI and other stuff that I now use. But I think the basic thing that I wrote down was the human skills. And so it's that balance between people profit. But I think the ultimate key is don't check your humanity at the door. Because at the end of the day, all you have is who you are as a person. And then that's character, values, principle, integrity. That can never be taken away from you. And you may lose in the short run. But remember, I use the term play the long game. I've used that a couple of times. My encouragement to people is play the long game. Forgo at times, and I gave you an example where we said no to something that would have been profitable and when we really needed, but on principle, I said no. I now finding I still have people coming to me all the time and wanting to do business with me. I get referrals. And I really believe because, yeah, I'm pretty good at what I do, but also because they've seen me to be consistent. And I really try to live by my character and my values and principles. So check the ego at the door, become reliable, consistent. And I would add one last thing here manners. Be a person that people want to be around. Don't be a jerk. right? And I could say it worse than that, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Be winsome, right? Because at the end of the day, people remember how you treated them, how you spoke to them, and how you made them feel, not if you looked down to them and ignored them, right? Everyone has dignity and value and worth. There it is, I guess, in a nutshell.
Wow. I appreciate this. Geez, thank you so much. And I've taken you a little bit over. Um,
Okay.
I mean, you use the word a few times where you want to be relevant, and I think this was just a not only relevant, but I think brilliant. I think what you've compiled and been able to pull together and learn through your 35 years is so. I think it's so important and so vital because it allows, especially our viewers, to know that you've been at this for this long. You've developed, you've grown, you've learned through that process. Where I do find that there are probably some young people out there who go, you know what, I know enough, or I feel like I know enough, or I can take a step back or kick my feet up. And this gives them a clear indicator or idea of what it takes to be successful for 35 plus years, and some of the challenges that you faced of going to, back to school in your late 30s and going, taking on some of those challenges. I think that's so important. And again, I really want to thank you so much for this. What a great opportunity for us to reconnect, but also a great opportunity for me to just learn and be reminded of some of the great things that you share and teach. I really appreciate you, sir. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, and Andrew, and I appreciate you. And this is not going to be a mutual appreciation thing. I think, but just to be really candid, I mean, I've known you for a long time, worked with you closely. We've had some very meaningful conversations. I've watched you develop and learn and grow. And you are where you are today because a lot of those things. And yeah, I've had a little bit of influence, but have a lot of other people. You've had good people around you, and you've been willing to learn. That's the key. So back at you, you've been willing to hear it and take it and reflect and do something rather than go, well, that doesn't fit my paradigm, so it's out. Well, you can. I mean, at the end of the day, people that watch this, some people I fully expect are going to not like some of the things I said. And I'm not trying to make them angry and I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm just giving you my take. So you've asked me, so I'm being candid with you. But you don't have to believe you or me. Go out for yourself. And over time, you will learn things. And I've always said the life and the world is a teacher, and it'll teach you what you need to learn if you're willing to ask the questions. And sometimes what comes back, and this has certainly been for me, sometimes I heard not what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear. And hopefully today has been maybe a bit more. I'm not trying to tickle your ears. I'm trying to give you some stuff that, from my perspective, and it's only mine. Talk to other people, listen to other folks, read other whatever. But this is one man's perspective. And if it gives you some ideas, great. And then create people around you, create a community that don't just feed you what you want to hear, but actually make you reflect and even make you uncomfortable, because growth does not come through comfort. When you get a trainer, I remember I worked for many years, I worked with a personal trainer, and the way I got stronger, more fit was by pushing. And then he would give me more weight, and then he'd give me a different exercise, and then we would do this. And I go, oh, this is hard, and I'm paying for this, right? I'm doing it for free. And so I got better.
Yeah.
But I had to make that choice. So each of us have a decision to make. And with every decision is an outcome. And if you don't like the outcome, then sometimes stuff happened along the way, it wasn't your fault. But for the most part, the outcome is based on your choice. So choose carefully.
I love it. Thank you. I sorry, one last thing, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do you have a favorite quote that you'd like to share?
sure. And it's by a guy named Ralph, but not this Ralph. It's Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he said, "Who you are speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say."
I love it. I
It's
love it.
about everything we've taught. It's about who you are. Who are you? Self awareness. Because who you are says more than what you say.
Thank you so much, sir. I
You're
really appreciate
welcome. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, Andrew.
it. Just